Today's video is not going to be as edited. We are just today going to talk about sources and how they work and who uses them and everything that has to do with NBA rumors and all these sorts of things. So I just want to talk about this because I feel like people online maybe don't always understand how these things kind of work and the way to use sources and think about sources. And I don't want to act like I have direct sources. I've had some sources in the past. Not incredibly great ones, but I have had a few. And I have worked with a lot of people who do, and I know how they work. After writing for SLC Dunk, I have a pretty clear idea of how these things work. So, anyways, the first thing I wanted to say is when you are following reporters online, Twitter, and these different places, we live in a different world than back in the day where you would get your local newspaper and get the latest report from the local beat writer who had access to players, and players would typically open up to reporters a lot more than they do now. It's not the same world. Anyways, when you are online, if you see someone report something and they are a reputable person, if you say something like, "Who are your sources?" I'm telling you right now, that's an embarrassing thing to say. Please stop saying that. If you've said that in the past, please stop. What you need to be doing is doing your homework on these different people. You need to follow reputable reporters. All of these reporters do a ton of work, and you should really appreciate the local beat writers who put in the work that create these relationships that allow them to get these different sources. Now, sometimes you'll see someone who comes out with a report and you won't know if that's a reputable person or not. My advice to you is to probably just say nothing online and keep yourself from saying something that's going to embarrass you down the road. Because guess what? A lot of these reporters started somewhere, and you don't know if they actually do have a great source. So don't say those things, okay? Some of these guys are extremely connected, and I think the best example of something like that is Jake Fisher, who really jumped on the scene like 3 or 4 years ago, started putting out some of those trade rumors, and everyone was like, what is this? I mean, is this real? And I followed him closely, and the reason I followed him is because I was like, some of these things could be possible, and they are along the lines of some sort of trade negotiations that would make sense if they happened. And that first year that Jake Fisher jumped on the scene with Yahoo, or I can't remember if it was he started with Yahoo or he ended up at Yahoo, wherever, turned out to be a lot of them turned out to be true. And then that was kind of how you said, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about and is reporting on things that honestly some other people might be scared to do. And that's why we need to appreciate the reporters like Jake Fisher a lot, and the Mark Steins out there who are willing to make those reports. All right, so the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit with sources, and something you've got to keep in mind, is that sources come from lots of different places. And I kind of sat and I made my list here, wrote down in my notes for this video, just some ideas and just some things you should consider when you're looking at sources. When someone says sources said, well, those come from multiple places, and different reporters can have sources on different things from different people. So different points of view and different motivations, okay? But typically the source that is going to reveal these different types of trade rumors and things or news or whatever it is, you're going to look at typically agents of players are going to be one of those major sources of news that might leak something. You also will have teams that have different motivations. They may leak something. A lot of beat writers are either connected to agents or they're connected to teams. Both of those have different motivations. One may be trying to do one thing that's good for the team. The other may be doing things that's good for the player. And those don't always coincide. And so they may leak things to help with their public perception, which is a big deal. And a lot of these teams and players and agents and all of these people are trying to help with that public perception. The next is the players themselves or their families. we have had a lot of these different things. And whether it comes from the player, we have situations where we know certain beat writers have connections, very good ones with certain players. I think the biggest example of that is Chris Haynes and Damian Lillard. Basically, if Chris Haynes says something, you know that that's coming from Damian Lillard. Or if he's talking about Damian Lillard, you know that's legit. And he likely gets a lot of his different rumors because of his connection with Damian Lillard, whether it's through Damian Lillard or his agent because of that connection. So that's one way reporters or bloggers or writers or whoever, online social personalities sometimes get these leaks and the news. The other one is the NBA itself. A lot of these beat writers, a lot of these writers have connections with people like Adam Silver or someone in the NBA front office. A lot of these beat writers go to these NBA conventions and they get connected to someone in the front office. I've had connections to people in the front office, but in a bad way, that I hated it. When Monty McCutcheon got mad at me for something I wrote about the referees, screw them. I was right. I backed it up with all facts. But guess what? I got to be on a conference call and get yelled at for 30 minutes because of them deciding that what I said wasn't accurate. And guess what? It was. Now, I know there are some people out there who like to be in the good graces of the NBA referees because, by the way, they read all that stuff out there. The NBA front offices read all this stuff. So I don't care. I'm just, I don't care. If Monty's watching this, guess what? I was right. I backed it up. I was right. And you can tell me how hard the NBA referee job is all you want, but we certainly see a lot of international basketball where things go pretty well. And somehow those international refs do a pretty decent job without kowtowing to stars in the NBA. Could we just have an NBA official or two that just calls things the same for the 15th guy on the bench, the same way he calls things for LeBron James? Can we please have the officiating improve? Monty! Anyways, moral of that story is that some of these writers and people out there have connections to the NBA front office, and sometimes it's through like the NBA Referee Association or the NBA itself, Adam Silver or someone in his front office. And a lot of times those people will get, different stories because, the NBA wants things out there. Maybe they want to see how people react. And I guess I just reminded myself of another one. Some people have connections to owners. Owners love this stuff. Owners are not different than you or me. Ryan Smith ain't different than you or me in terms of his interest in the Utah Jazz. It's why he bought them. You want to be a part of it. It's fun. You know what I want to be? I don't normally, growing up, people would say, if you could be anyone in this world, who would you be? I usually was like, I like old James. James is fine. I'm fine being James. But I tell you what, there are worse things than being a billionaire and having the money to buy the Utah Jazz and being able to be in the Jazz front office, being able to be the guy that signs off on trades, the draft, being in that draft room, draft workouts, connections to players, being in the know. That would be pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I would not mind that type of life. Right? That's the good stuff. Now, that the way this connects to sources is some of these owners like to be perceived in a good way. In fact, probably more than you think. And owners have more of an influence on teams than people realize. Every trade that goes through has to be signed off on owners. And a lot of these owners want to make sure that the moves happen are the ones they want to do. I have sneaking suspicions about certain things with the Jazz because that is a very real thing, and you have to understand that owners are a big time thing in the NBA. They just are. So when you're thinking NBA teams, think NBA owners. And a lot of these owners are fans of certain writers just like we are. So an NBA owner might be a big fan of Woj and gets a kick out of Woj bombs, and they want to be a part of that, and they want to be in the know, and they want to tell their rich friends like, hey, guess what I heard last week from Woj? Guess what the Toronto Raptors are doing? They like that stuff. And so they're going to be the types that might be willing to talk to a reporter and leak those things. And they like to just be in the know. They're just like us. They're just like us. And finally, just people in the organization. There are people that know certain people in different front offices, whether it's someone in the analytics department, someone in the, they know the ball boy, they know the social media person, they know someone in the marketing department, and they get little bits and pieces of advice, the legal department, player personnel, all these different things. There's all these people that have different connections, and some of them get connected in different ways. And that's how certain things can leak, or people can find out information about certain things. Different local radio has different connections to lots of different people. That's why I pay attention to local radio guys. If they say a thing, they heard it somewhere. I know certain people that consider themselves radio aren't legit, but if Spence Checkett says something, or someone from 1280 The Zone or whatever says something, I tend to listen, because they have connections to people within the organization, and not necessarily Danny Ainge or whoever, some GM of, Sam Presti or whoever. They might have a connection to someone within the team, or someone you might not realize knows different things for different reasons. And I know certain connections that people I know have had in the past that were really good, where you could really believe a certain thing, that, okay, this is legit, this is real, for a fact, for things I'm not going to say here, but you could know for certain that this was going to be happening, So there's different ways people can get it. So stop asking people for connections, because they don't, people aren't going to want to lose their job in a front office because the person they told outed them in the media. They might get in trouble. So stop asking them that. It's ridiculous. Do not do that. Instead, listen to them, absorb it, and think about it. And then this is the thing you have to do when you hear these different reports, is you have to understand that all these sources have motivations. Like I said, agents have motivations. Let's get our thumb in there. They want to make sure that their player gets the best deal possible, because guess what that means? They get paid. And if they know that a certain team isn't going to pay up, then it might be a good idea for them to say, hey, a certain team out there wants my client, pay up. Or, if you're not willing to give my player this amount, guess what? We heard from so-and-so and so-and-so that they want to give this player this amount. And then that might put a little bit of pressure on a certain team to pay more. And you know what? This is just a rule of life. Follow the money. You can usually figure out a lot of different motivations based off of money. And if you can kind of think of things in that way, like who would be leaking this and why, and who's going to make money off of this. Now, the other reason that teams or players or whoever it is have motivations is the other thing that's pretty important: public perception. People don't like to be embarrassed, So teams might go put something out there because they just want to be perceived well. Oh, we were in the trade talks for this guy. It just didn't work out. They were asking for too much. How many times have we seen that? Like with the New York Knicks and the Jazz, when they were having the Donovan Mitchell talks, they had all those different reports. We heard them all summer. They were all completely legit. 100% legit, okay? 100%. That was all real. That was all based off of things that happened. But then when it didn't happen, what happens afterwards? Well, then we get reports from the Knicks like, oh, the Jazz were asking for way too much. The Jazz were asking for way too much. Well, it turned out the Jazz weren't asking for too much, because Cleveland's turned out pretty good because of that trade. But what they were trying to do is save face. That public perception is what they're trying to do. Now, there is another reason that these things might happen, and sometimes this is a reason teams do let these things leak, is they are trying to influence some sort of move that they want to happen. Whether it's money on an agent side, well, a team out there might put out why would a team put out a leak during the draft? Well, maybe they want other teams to know that they'd like to move up, or they would like to do something, or they'd like to let other teams know that there is a certain player that's available. Send us a trade proposal. We've seen this with the Jazz, and I don't care how many people get mad online at me on that stupid Twitter app and tell me things like, oh no, who's your sources? Are you just making this up? What are you doing? Why are you spread? No, because these are coming from a real place. And these are teams that are trying to influence a trade. So when we're talking about the Lauri Markkanen trade rumors, you know what the Utah Jazz could have done if they wanted to make sure these things, they could have put a no trade clause in Lauri Markkanen's contract before the trade deadline, okay? We all know the story about February 6th. And what was going to happen if they did not get the contract with Lauri Markkanen signed before, if they signed it after February 6th, then they were not going to be able to trade him in this following season. Well, if the Jazz wanted to shut down trade rumors, they could have put a no trade clause in that first season, doing essentially the same thing. So if anyone wants to tell me that these trade rumors for Lauri Markkanen weren't real or did not have some sort of reality from the Jazz, you are wrong, because they could have just put a no trade clause in there and made sure it happened. Instead, we got trade proposals up to the very end, okay? Because guess what? The Utah Jazz were more interested in getting more than Lauri Markkanen was worth. It's just a fact. And that's why I think next offseason, we are going to see a lot of the same thing. And, you can connect the dots with the Jazz draft position and all these things and what picks they owe in 2026 and stuff, but we're not doing that here. All right. And finally, I already mentioned it a little bit. We've got to celebrate the different agents like Mark Stein and Jake Fisher, who were willing to put their necks on the line for these stories and get these tips from different agents and teams and personnel. And I don't always know exactly where these come. I know that there's some sort of network out there that certain people are in and certain people are not. And I know Woj and Shams are in it, and I don't know exactly how it works. I don't care enough to go research it, but I'm sure there's people out there that know more than me, But I appreciate those guys because they're putting the stories out there and they should be followed. Some things amount to nothing and some things turn into something else or give you a bigger picture of what's going on with the team. All right, guys. So I just wanted to talk about that. I felt like it's been a while since I've wanted to do this video. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Let me know what you think in the comments. Big shout out to the members who are supporting this channel, especially the All-Stars, but all of you members who support this channel. I appreciate it a ton. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. We got the season right around the corner. It's almost September. Can you believe it? Live shows are coming back. Utah Jazz season and the NBA is here soon. Like and subscribe to the channel, guys. I'll talk to you next time. Tomorrow, perhaps.